In 1819, an American stockholder named Moses Austin lost his fortune during a financial panic. So, to make his money back, he appealed to the Spanish governors of Mexico to try and establish colonies of Americans in Texas. The Spanish were eager to accept because the small population of Texas were vulnerable to Native American raids. But due to a failed American filibuster campaign into Texas, the Long Expedition, it wasn't until 1821 that the Spanish gave permission to settle around 300 families in the region. However, shortly afterwards, the Spanish were ousted as the Mexicans declared independence after 11 years of war. The First Mexican Empire only lasted 3 years before it gave way to a federal republic and a new constitution in 1824. The new government continued to allow thousands to cross the border under Moses Austin's son, Stephen. Eventually, the immigrants outnumbered the Mexican-born residents of Coahuila y Texas by about 3 to 1. But with the immigrants came a great deal of tension. The Americans maintained their Protestant practices in the Catholic nation, and they had brought a lot of their slaves into Texas despite Mexico trying to put an end to the slave trade. Plus, in 1826, there was an early, albeit very small attempt to secede due to land disputes, the Fredonian Rebellion. It failed, but it did encourage the US government to offer to buy the region. The situation was made worse in 1829 when Mexico abolished slavery and in 1830 banned immigration to Texas due to the worsening tensions. However, many still crossed the borders illegally. The new arrivals also had to pay high tariffs, and this resulted in the Anahuac disturbances of 1832, which saw Texas civilians fighting a Mexican garrison. The disturbances helped unite a great deal of the Texan population and also motivated them to lend their support to the Federalist Santa Anna, who was seizing power in the South. In 1833, Stephen Austin traveled to Mexico City to meet the government and discuss reforms. However, he was imprisoned because they suspected him of inciting revolt. He was eventually released, but now even more people, including Austin himself, supported independence. And calls for independence grew louder when Santa Anna introduced the plan of Cuernavaca, turning Mexico into a centralist republic. Rebellion across Mexico was quick to follow, after militias in Zacatecas rose up in April 1835. The rebels in Zacatecas were defeated, but Santa Anna was still concerned about the Texans, so in order to disarm them, he sent a small force to retrieve a cannon from the town of Gonzales in October. The Texans refused to allow them to enter the town and even fired at them, thus starting the war. Militiamen and volunteers from all over Texas marched to Bexar, modern-day San Antonio, and lay siege. The city fell in December, but a large Mexican army was already en route. The following February, around 200 Texans, including folk hero Davy Crockett, took refuge in the Alamo as 2,000 Mexicans arrived in the city and lay siege to the mission. Elsewhere, Texans, including Sam Houston, signed the Declaration of Independence on March the 2nd. But just 4 days later, the Mexicans stopped bombarding the Alamo and launched a successful assault on the mission, killing the Texans within. Also in March, the Mexicans killed around 400 prisoners they had captured in small skirmishes around Texas. This, the Goliad Massacre, and the deaths of those in the Alamo served as a rallying cry to Texans and even Americans. But Santa Anna was still convinced of victory, so divided his army up and spread it out across Texas to crush the rebels as they retreated. He personally led the army in pursuit of Sam Houston and caught up with him in late April. But as the Mexicans camped near the San Jacinto River, Houston decided to launch a surprise attack. With about 900 men, he assaulted Santa Anna's position, catching them completely off guard. Half of the Mexican army was killed, while the rest, including Santa Anna himself, were taken prisoner. Santa Anna then agreed to grant Texas independence in exchange for safe passage back to Mexico. Meanwhile, the battle made Houston a hero, and he was elected the first president of Texas.